Well, Mark, thank you for coming and joining us here in the Queen City.
I didn't know you guys served alcohol, because that's the only reason everybody's standing.
No, not at all. Well, we're thrilled. We're delighted to have you, Mark, to join us for this Fireside Chat. This is unique in that we have, as I mentioned a moment ago, we will have some 1,200 current entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs who will join us for this, this unique conference. And I think a lot of people know you as the Dallas Mavericks owner. The truth of the matter is that happened later.
Right.
Right. You've been a serial entrepreneur for a long period of time.
Since I'm 12 years old.
Right. Grew up in Pittsburgh,
right.
PA.
Yep.
Steelers fan.
Yep, absolutely. But I got to tell you a quick story that the mayor just reminded me of. The new owner of the Carolina team, the Panthers, grew up in Pittsburgh with me.
Oh, that's right.
And I didn't know him very well at all, but someone sent me a picture of me and him at a mutual friend's Sweet 16 party. So,
who was more successful at the Sweet 16 party?
Oh, we were, let's put it this way, we were the kids in the corner with the glasses. It wasn't pretty. It was Sweet 16 for them, not us.
So you went to University of Pittsburgh for a year, had a number of different, started a number of different businesses even in that 1 year that you were there in Pittsburgh.
I dropped out of high school, so I wanted to take business, and the high school I went to didn't offer any business classes unless I was a senior in high school. And I'm like, come on, I mean, I'm trying to be ambitious, and they're like, no. And so I took some classes at night at the University of Pittsburgh, and then just since I was enrolled at Pitt, I just stopped going to class in high school and kept on going to class at Pitt, and they allowed me to transfer back my credits to graduate from high school. So I officially was a high school dropout until I rectified that.
And you decided, I thought your choice, you went to Indiana University.
Right, so Pitt didn't have a full undergrad business program, just a few classes, and so I saw a list of the top 10 business schools, and I picked out the cheapest one, and it was Indiana. And I'd never seen it, never seen the campus, didn't know anything about it other than the basketball team, and I was like, that's good enough for me, let's go.
Well, that's outstanding. What I thought was unique, so when you were in Indiana, again, this serial entrepreneur thing was beating in your chest.
Yep.
Right? And you'll come to it in a minute in regards to how you can't work for anybody else, because that wouldn't work. But what is it that drove you? Tell us a little bit about your family and what you came,
Sure.
your background, where you came from, and then what drove you in this sense that you wanted to go into business for yourself, knowing that business was your thing.
My dad did upholstery on cars, so if you got a rip in your car seat, you would take it to where he worked. My mom worked odd jobs from wherever, and we lived in an okay neighborhood, but we weren't poor by a long shot, but we were truly middle class. And over and over, my dad didn't go to college, my mom didn't go to college, and so they would beat into me, you're going to college. And they used to make me work at odd jobs so that I would learn the value of work. And I'd go where my dad worked doing it with cars, and he'd make me sweep the whole, and this place was nasty, make me sweep all the time, tried to get me a job in a mill, but couldn't get me a job in a mill. My mom wanted me to lay carpet because she was worried about me if I didn't have a trade. And so she got a friend of hers to try to get me, to teach me how to lay carpet. And if you ever go, there's this little office in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. If you trip over the carpet, that's where I learned how to lay carpet. And I was going through these things, I'm like, this is just not me. And I always had that individual spirit to say, okay, I can come up with things that can make me money. I mean, when I was 9, I would sell baseball cards. When I was 12, I told my dad I wanted a pair of basketball shoes. And it just so happens he was playing poker with his buddies, who were all probably rip-roaring drunk at the time, and I just didn't realize it. But I was like, Dad, I want a new pair of tennis shoes. The new Beta Bullets were coming out or whatever they were, and new Converse. And he's like, you see those shoes on your feet? They work just fine. When you have a job, you can go buy whatever you want. I'm like, Dad, I'm 12. I don't have a job. And one of his buddies stood up, well, not stood up, but he said, hey, I got a job for you. he had these boxes of garbage bags. And he's like, I've got these boxes of garbage bags. I don't know what to do with. Why don't you sell them? I'm like, cool. You know, what do they cost me? And they literally were a box of 100 these blue garbage bags that he would sell them to me for $3. And then I went door to door. And I was like, hi, my name is Mark. Do you use garbage bags? And I learned I could sell. It was just like, okay, $6, you know, I'll drop them off whenever you need them. Just call me. And I made some money, bought my shoes, and, you know, and that just gave me confidence, and it took off from there.
So after you graduated from
Indiana.
And I was asking just back in the backstage, I said, you moved to Dallas,
Right.
Texas. And I said, well, what in the world made you decide to move to Dallas, Texas? And you had a great answer, but I'd love you to share it with the audience. So what made you decide, growing up in Pittsburgh, moving to Indiana, my next stop should be Dallas? That's where I want to start.
So a couple of my buddies from Indiana had moved down to Dallas, and I'm like, call him up, what's it like? What's it like? He goes, well, you know, compared to Indiana, the weather's great, the economy is really good, and the women are beautiful. And I didn't hear anything about the economy or anything else. And so I was like, here I come. I had a 1977 Fiat X19 that literally had a hole in the floorboard. And also I had to carry, you know, the quarts of oil in the little trunk it had. So I couldn't bring a lot of stuff, but I'll never forget getting closer and closer to Indiana and seeing the white line go by, you know, in the bottom of the floorboard. And it was just like, it was meant to be, I guess.
So you got to Dallas, and you got a job.
Yeah.
Or took a job.
2 jobs.
2 jobs.
I got a job working at night as a bartender at a place called Alon's. And then I got a job selling software at a company called Your Business Software.
That didn't work out too good.
No. The bar, I couldn't, the bar, that was a whole different story. We won't go there. But working at Your Business Software, it actually went really good for a while because I didn't have a tech background, and so it gave me the opportunity to teach myself. And I found out that I liked tech, you know, which was shocking to me. And so I would sit in there and use the computers and teach myself all the software from way back when, the WordStars, the WordPerfects, the, you know, the Peachtree softwares for those of us that go way back when. And one day, and mind you, I'm living in a 3-bedroom apartment with 6 guys. 6 23, 24-year-old guys. However nasty you think it is, it was worse. I didn't have a closet. I didn't have a drawer. I had a pile. And I wear contacts. But I wear my glasses at night. And I didn't have any money, so I broke my glasses, and I would tape them up, and they'd tear them apart, and hide one piece here, one piece there. Oh, it was an adventure. But so one day, I'm living in this shithole, and I get the opportunity to close a big deal. And it was going to be $1,500 commission to me. I'm like, yes, sir, let's go. And I call my boss, a guy named Michael Hugh Mecke, and I said, Michael, I've got this deal. And part of my job responsibilities were sweeping the floor. It was a retail store, sweeping the floor, making sure the windows were clean and opening it up. And I've got, you know, one of my fellow employees all set to do all that. I call him up and say, Michael, it's a $15,000 sale, but I need to go pick it up before work. I won't be there to open things up. He goes, no, I need you to open up the store. I'm like, I got it covered. And I make the executive decision that I'm going to go pick up the check, and I'm going to hand him the check, and he's going to forget all about it, and we're all going to be friends, and I'll make my commission. Fired me for disobeying him. I haven't seen him since, but...
That was probably the best thing that could have happened.
Yeah, right? But in any event, but it made me realize that I need to work for myself again, you know, that I'm an entrepreneur at heart. And so I just took it, you know, it's not, just is what it is. And so I couldn't take the $1,500 commission. It was his company, it was his sale. And so I found another customer that I'd been talking to, a prospect, a company called Architectural Lighting. And here I am, sleeping in the shithole with no job and desperate. But I convinced this company, Architectural Lighting, there was a piece of software that I wanted to sell them for $500, and I told them it cost me $250, and that I would make it work and train them on it and support them if they would loan me the $250 to buy the software up front. And if it didn't work for whatever reason, I'd walk their dogs, clean their cars, scrub their toilets, whatever it took to pay them back. And fortunately, it worked, and that led to another customer, led to another customer. That was a company called Micro Solutions. Over the next 7 years, I didn't take a vacation, taught myself how to program, taught myself, more about technology, networking than I thought I would ever know. And we grew to, give or take 36 million in sales, 80 employees. And I sold it back, 1990, I guess, time flies, for $6 million. But for, a 29, 30-year-old kid, that was real money. And so then it's big money. And not that it's not now, it really is, but it's just, to get from the time of getting fired to getting to 80 employees and 36 million in sales, literally, not one vacation.
Yeah, let's talk about the hustle required, because I think a lot of people dream about being an entrepreneur and want to be an entrepreneur conceptually, but don't understand the time and commitment and the sacrifice necessary to be able to outwork everybody to get to that side, right? Yeah. And so even getting those 7 years, if you added up all the time on an hourly basis, and yes, you sold the company in 1990 for $6 million and netted a couple $1 million into your own pocket, but it was not just about, you weren't trying to get to that amount of money. You were trying to do your own thing.
Yeah, I mean.
And so talk about what's required for entrepreneurs and the hustle to get to that other side.
I learned, first of all, one, I had nothing to lose, right? I'm in the shithole. How bad can it be? Another quick story. So I didn't have money for a car, and my X19 with the hole in the floorboard had died. And so I literally, the way I got my car was I saw a car that was stranded on the side of the road, this old Camaro. And I forget exactly how, but I figured out which bank had put the money up for it for somebody to buy. And I called the bank and I said, would you let me pick up the payments on this? Only I need you to lower the payments down a little bit. And they said yes. So I had this, 1980-something Trans Am that I was able to use. But the point being that you just have to do things you never think you're going to have to do in order to survive and get through it. Those first couple months, I remember thinking to myself, I'm in business 2 months now. I remember getting to the point where I had $15,000 in sales, probably 6 months into the company, and I'm still living in the shithole and thinking, okay, I can do this, I can do this. And along the way, it was lots of trial and error. There were things that were new to me, things that were terrifying to me, things that I would break out into a sweat. But I always remember going into my customers and just trying to be brutally honest and say to them, if I can help you, right? If I can bring value, if I can make your company more competitive, more profitable, will you work with me? And you don't have to put money, I'll do the work to prove it. And if I get it done, then we'll figure it all out, or they agree to a price and then they'll pay it at that point. And one by one, I just kept on making customers happy, and lost some, for every one I lost, picked up 3. And I was so nervous about the whole thing that, I couldn't imagine slowing down, and so people talk about, life, family balance. I had none. I literally remember dating some girl, and this is truth. And it was like, we'd been dating a couple years, and like, Mark, you're so into your work. I want a picket fence. I want a house. I want kids. It's me or your job. And I was like, or me or your company. And I was like, what's your name again? I'm like, if you don't know me well enough by now, after dating 2 years, to know that I'm driven on this. There was no balance. And that's not, look, today it's different, obviously, and depending on how old you are and your circumstances, you've got to try to figure all that out. But the one thing I kept on telling myself is, everybody's trying to kick my ass, right? There's nobody giving this to me. There's nobody that's just saying, come on, Mark, this is all yours. You know, there were customers, I'd show up at 1 in the morning because that was the only time I could fit it in. There were times when I was doing software and I gained probably 30 pounds because as I'm learning the program, I literally would go to KFC and buy a bucket of ribs. And I'd sit there eating and programming, and it'd be like 20 hours later when I stopped. And I thought I'd been there for 2 or 3 hours. You just focus so hard, and that's just part of the price you pay. And, you know, that's just reality. For all these amazing entrepreneurs that are here, you know, there's somebody out there. It could be a 12-year-old girl. It could be an 80-year-old man trying to kick your ass and take that business from you. And that's the way I always looked at it. And that competitive side of me always took over, and that's what drives me to this day, the competitive side.
In 1995, you started to, which is interesting because you've taken this path all the way through, both with audio and video.
Yep.
And television, and I was going to say audio and video in particular. You started a company, or helped to fund a company called
AudioNet. Yep.
AudioNet. So tell us about AudioNet and then how AudioNet became
What it became.
broadcast, and then ultimately that .com. I'm going to ask you about the .com,
Sure.
you know, boom, and then the .com burst.
So
and your timing of that.
Think back 23 years ago. People didn't know what streaming was. I mean, it's hard to conceive now, particularly if you're young, but it's like, one time, you know, as you know, I went to Indiana, and in Dallas in the mid-90s, you know, when we had a good basketball team, we literally would, when we wanted to listen to our big games like Indiana, Purdue, go Hoosiers, we would call somebody in Bloomington who would put a radio next to a speakerphone and dial us, and we'd sit on the other side listening over a speakerphone, drinking our beer and whipping it up or doing whatever. And the internet was just starting to happen, and now I'm a tech geek and I'm like into all of it. And we're like, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so one of my buddies from Indiana, Todd Wagner, was like, look, we've been thinking about this. And I'm like, no, I'll figure it out. I'm a networking guy now. And so we looked for ways to stream Indiana basketball. We called it netcasting back then, over the brand new internet. And so I went out and bought a Packard Bell 90 megahertz computer and an ISDN line and downloaded all this software. And I said, you know what, I'm going to figure it out. And lo and behold, by, oh golly, early 1995, we had figured out a way to, we took these 8-hour VCRs and connected it to a local radio station, record them, we'd bring them back, go through this process called encoding, and put it up on this website we called AudioNet. And then I'd go to any online forum, AOL, Prodigy, CompuServe, UUNet, whatever it was, or Usenet, and I like, if you're interested in Dallas sports at all, because we hadn't gotten to Indiana yet, if you're interested in Dallas sports, go to this website, AudioNet. And back then, you had a dial-up modem, you had to download this software called TCP/IP, and you had to have software from your internet provider, which meant that so few people knew how to use it, we had no idea if it would work or not. But all of a sudden, AudioNet went from 10 people a day to 100 people to 1,000 people a day. And as we added radio stations, they're getting calls from all over the world from people who are listening to their shows on demand, not even live. And then we worked with a company that put together live software, a company called Zing, and we made it live, and then everything changed. And that's really when streaming was born. And we just grew that. And then in 1998, we got into video, changed the name to broadcast.com, went public, and it was the biggest IPO in the history of the stock market at the time. And then we sold it to Yahoo.
So your timing was pretty good, though.
Yeah, the timing was really good.
Because you sold broadcast.com for $5.7 billion to Yahoo.
In stock now. It wasn't,
stock.
It was in stock. It wasn't in cash.
But you also did something very unusual.
Yeah, collared it all.
You collared it with a hedge.
Right.
So explain to the audience what that was and why you did that.
So we sold it for $5.7 billion in stock. And, you know, by that time, let's see, it was 1999, early 2000, I'd been in the tech industry for 15 years. And I had seen these companies and these themes come and go. Like, you know, when I started my first company, it was local area networks, and we did a great job with local and then wide area networks. And there were these companies, Wellfleet, Synoptics, that went like this and came charging down. Software companies, the old WordPerfects and WordStars and boom, crashed. PC companies, whoop, crashed. I'm like, I don't need to watch this story play out again with my money. And so I went to my broker and I said, we can't just sell it all at once because I had a 6-month holdup. And so I literally took every penny that I had and bought an index, shorted an index actually, that was the internet index that said, if the internet stock market crashed before I could sell my stock, then I would make money off this index. Well, I ended up losing $25 million on that deal, which was good, believe it or not, because that meant I'd lasted my 6 months and I could put a collar where I could slowly sell out all my shares and protect myself in case the market crashed by buying lots of puts and selling lots of calls, which I did. And so after the deal closed, within 3 months after my short ended, the internet market just started to crater. And despite all these people I told, even people in the company, I mean, when I sold the company, we had 330 employees, 300 of them became millionaires on paper. And if they did what I told them to do, they not only stayed millionaires, they made even more money. Unfortunately, not all did. But that's how I was able to protect the stock that I got from Yahoo, and then eventually turn it into cash. And it's been called one of the top 10 trades of all time in the stock market.
No question. So at this point, you're 42 years old.
Yep.
And
I'm still 42, by the way.
Yeah, well, yeah. You just certainly look it, of course.
Oh, I appreciate it.
You're 42 years old. You've got this money in your pocket.
Yep.
You're in Dallas.
Yep.
And somehow or another you get the idea, or this team is available. The Dallas Mavericks are available.
It wasn't available yet.
Or you made it
available.
You made it available.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, you bought it from, I guess it was from Ross Perot Jr.
Yep.
And you paid what at the time seemed like an outrageous sum.
It was an outrageous sum, yeah.
$285 million.
It was the highest price ever paid for a sports team of any sport, of any kind at the time. And people thought I was just a flaming idiot.
Right. You've totally lost your mind.
Totally lost my mind. Something happened, too many drinks, and it was over.
So that's in 2000.
Yep.
And as we've seen in 2015 and 16, teams were sold for $2 billion.
Not enough.
NBA team. Not enough.
Not enough.
Still not enough.
Still not enough.
So tell me, what you brought to the NBA, which was interesting, is a maverick, no pun intended on the word, but you were young, brash, single. You were close to the age of some of the players.
Yep, close enough.
And you certainly didn't hold your tongue when it came to talking about what the league needed to do to change.
Nope. I used to tell David Stern, who was the commissioner of the NBA, that NBA stood for nothing but attorneys. And just bam. And, it cost me some money, but it was worth it.
Yeah, it did. It cost you a little bit of money, but it was worth
it.
clearing your mind.
Facts
Absolutely.
matter. I mean, maybe not in politics today, but I thought even back then.
We'll come back to the politics in a minute. But you did really change the game. And when I say change the game, change the league in many ways, in a very positive way. Many NBA players who I know were friends with at that time, you said, I'm going to take care of my team.
Yep.
I'm going to take care of my guys. We're going to have the best in class of everything.
Yep.
The best locker room, the best plane, the best of everything.
Yeah, I mean, look, to be one of the top 450 players in the world at anything, let alone, and in this case, basketball, you don't just get there by accident. It takes heart, it takes soul, it takes effort. Genetics too, but even there's lots of gifted athletes that, as you know, didn't get anywhere close. And when I got to the Mavericks, the only award the Mavs had won was being voted the worst professional sports franchise of the 90s. And so it was a mess. They literally spent more money on computer repairs than we did on player development and on player health. And to me, that was the craziest thing ever. But as it turns out, nobody in the NBA did. And so I remember talking to our coach, Don Nelson, back then, and others in the organization saying, okay, we're paying this guy $2, $3, $4 million, and we're just leaving it up to him to go work on his own to improve his game. That's stupid. So I put out a call, and we brought back all kinds of former Mavs, Rolando Blackman, Brad Davis, Derek Harper, and others, to come in and say, you guys are now our player development coaches. And we had 15 players, and we had probably 10 development coaches. And the whole league laughed at me. I remember going to NBA owners meetings, and the other owners were like, what are you doing? You're out of your mind. And, all the sports writers would write articles. This guy has no clue what he's doing. He should just sit up in the owner's box and shut up and let the basketball gurus do what they do. And I'm like, I don't care what you say. I don't care what you do. This is what I know is the right thing to do. And now, all these years later, every team has got huge, player development staffs, and they realize that, you draft a player, you trade for a player, you sign a player. It's your job to get the most out of them in coordination with the player. And so those types of things were unheard of back then. The idea, when I started with the NBA, they thought their product was basketball. And this applies to entrepreneurs, very much so. You got to know what your product is. Micro Solutions, my product was profitability, using technology to generate profitability. At broadcast.com, it was our ability to make the world smaller. Even though we broadcast radio stations, those were proof of concepts so that corporations could do, Intel would pay us hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars so that they could stream their product introductions in 5 languages around the world, things they weren't able to do prior to that. So we made the world smaller. With the Mavs, we didn't sell basketball. We sold fun. We sold experiences. And I would go to the NBA owners' meetings, and I'd say, okay, what was the score of your last game? Do you remember this jump shot from your last game? And like, no. And then I'd say, okay, do you remember the first game you went to with your mom or your dad? Do you remember the first game you took your son or your daughter, your niece or your nephew to? That game you went to with a girlfriend or your wife or your buddies? Oh yeah, that's what we sell. We sell experiences. And those experiences have to be affordable, and those experiences have to be made special. And so, I brought in music because what I learned early on was when a parent brought their 10-year-old or 8-year-old, that 8-year-old is looking like this, whenever there's not action going on. And so I had to keep them engaged. And all these things were completely foreign to the NBA. And they just thought I was an idiot. But, as I've learned over the years, that every time someone thinks I'm an idiot, I'm good.
What was in the 18 years you've now had the team?
God damn.
Right, which now you went from being the young gun to now you're one of the, let's call it more seasoned.
Older young guns, right. Yeah.
What was your greatest disappointment, and what was your greatest thrill in these 18 years that you've owned the team?
I mean, losing 2006 and winning in 2011, in terms of basketball, the thing about professional sports in particular, there's no other business. Apple Computer, biggest company by market cap in the universe, they have their best quarter ever. No one throws a parade at Cupertino.
What?
Google, doesn't matter what they do, no one's throwing a parade. Mavs win, 500,000 people line the streets, but along the way, the whole city, like when the Panthers were on their run, right? The whole city catches on fire, and everybody's talking about it. You can feel it, and it just takes everybody's attention away from their day-to-day life. And it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what you do, everybody comes together. And just watching that happen, particularly with our 2011 run, it was like no one expected it. I'd be lying if I said I expected it, and then we got closer and closer, and then the anticipation and the stress levels just build up because all these years we've gotten close and lost, and I'm like, something, you just don't want to let yourself think it's going to happen, and then you get there, and I'll never forget, there's 30 seconds left in the game, and I still get emotional thinking about it, and Jason Terry hits a shot, and we go up 11. And finally, I'm just like, oh shit, this is going to happen. And that's when I wouldn't let myself celebrate until then. it was that moment that I finally let go, and that moment itself was the best moment of owning the Dallas Mavericks.
No question.
Yeah, it's
Coincidentally, or maybe not so coincidentally, in 2011, you also joined Shark Tank.
Yep, 2010, yep.
After having won the NBA championship, and
Yep.
now you join Shark Tank, which in many ways this is like a huge Shark Tank
It really is.
audience.
It really is.
But tell us about having gone to Shark Tank. I think, if I read it correctly, in the last 6 years or 7 years, you've invested in 85 companies.
Yep.
And over almost $20 million
Over $20 million.
to these companies. So tell us about how the idea of them coming to you for Shark Tank and what it's meant to you and the opportunities you've given entrepreneurs over that period of time.
Those are good questions. First of all, people watch the show? That's good. Well, good. And the first thing I'll tell you, however big a jerk you think Kevin O'Leary is, he's a bigger one. Mark Burnett put together in the United States. It actually is a concept that started in Japan and then went to the United Kingdom called Dragon's Den, and then Mark Burnett brought it to the U.S. and turned it into Shark Tank. And I originally talked to him about it the first season, and they didn't cast me. And then I came back in the second season as a guest. And honestly, when I went on the show, they had bounced it around to different nights, and I'm thinking, this business show has got no chance of surviving. And so I go on there, do my 3 episodes as a guest, and I'm just buying every company no matter what. Because I'm thinking this thing's gone, and I'm like, I want to make my mark on this TV show because this is ABC, it's network television. I'm like, and Kevin and Damon and Barbara and Robert, they're looking at me like I'm crazy. It's just like when I went to the NBA, right? They're like, what the hell are you doing? I'm like, let's just have some fun. And the next thing you know, the show starts taking off, and it really starts getting a base of viewers. And now we start next week, a week from today, we start shooting season 10. But which is cool. Could you imagine, for me, 8 seasons of Mr. Wonderful? It's brutal. Brutal. But the good part about it is that, so many companies have come on there, and we've picked some and missed some. And, I've invested, as you said, in 85, but I think now we're up to 7 of those that have sold. We just sold a company out of Atlanta that went on Shark Tank as Cycloramic. They had the iPhone that used the buzzer, and you ran this app on it, and it just turned around and did a panoramic version of the phone, took panoramic pictures. Well, they changed the format of the iPhone, which is great. This is a great lesson for entrepreneurs, right? So this guy came in with this really cool app, worked with an iPhone 5, and it just turned around and take panoramic pictures and then stitch them together, and it was a cool picture. Well, so I give him $250,000, I think, for 20% of the company or 25% of the company. Not 4 months later, Apple changes the iPhone, and it's got this like rounded thing underneath, and we're like, oh, what are we going to do? But the guy was smart, and one of the things I always look for companies coming in is, what's your unique advantage? What is the one thing you have that differentiates you from other companies? And for this guy, the product was interesting, but as I said on the show, the ability to program video and use what became computer vision was a unique skill that was hard to find. And so we worked with him and actually worked with him to bring in another CEO. And they used that same technology to be able to scan cars. So now if you go to websites like Carvana to buy a car, and you see how you can turn the car around just right there, that started with their software. And the guy's name is Bruno. So Bruno, we just sold his company for $22.5 million a couple weeks ago. And so I walked away with 25% of that. So I was like, yeah, Shark Tank. Bring me some more Shark. But the point of it is, all these companies come on, and there's some rules of thumb that I thought were smart going in, but have really turned out to be true moving forward. One is sales cures all. Lots of companies come in and say, I have a great idea, or I have a company, and we've got some sales, but we only need to do this, and we only need to do that. And you talk to them, and you talk to the entrepreneur, and I'm like, why aren't you selling? This is your whole company. there's never been a company in the history of companies to survive without sales. And so I think, now as more and more people watch Shark Tank, they're seeing it. But if you can't sell, if it's your company and you can't sell, you're not going to be in business long, particularly when you're starting up and it's just you. And sales is not something you can give to somebody else and say, okay, I'm just going to hire salespeople. Michael Humecki, remember that guy I told you about that fired me for handing him the check? He was the guy who wouldn't, he was the CEO and owner. He would never sell. He thought he could just bring us in and sell it. And the company failed afterwards. You got to sell. And so there are principles like that. The other thing is when people get some momentum, they want to all of a sudden go big, right? Particularly that's kind of a dot-com thing. Let's buy our customers, raise a ton of money. Well, one of my buddies, Howard Tullman, says it best. He goes, you got to nail it before you scale it. If your company doesn't work, making it big won't solve your problems. It'll just add to your problems. Another thing that we try to convey, or I've learned and try to convey to our Shark Tank companies, is that raising money always seems to be like the big thing to entrepreneurs coming in. Well, if I can only raise this money. Raising money isn't an accomplishment, it's an obligation. The best equity is sweat equity. What you can do and seriously, if you're putting in the sweat and you're putting in the time and you're not out there raising money and you're grinding it out and you're hustling, then you deserve to give yourselves a hand because that's what it's all about. Because if you don't do that, it's not going to work. So many companies, and to me, that's part of the problem of Silicon Valley. They're so all about raising money, and they forget. That just creates an obligation. And when I give you my money in Shark Tank, what is this just like, okay, here's your 100 grand, call me when you're not so busy? No, I gave it to you for a reason, right? And I have expectations, and I want you to communicate with me, and I want to know that I'll tell you, it follows a normal distribution. I've had some really great companies, and I've had just some pure out idiots. And it's almost like drafting, in the second round of the NBA. Athletes will come in and just give you the best song and dance, and you think they've got it together. I had this one company, and they did these. So I try to get people to paint their faces to come to Mavs games. And, kids will put on paint, but when you're done with it, it's a mess. And so this company, Game Face, they had these things. They got surgical tape, and they had them reformatted so that you could just cut it up, color whatever colors or pre-buy the colors you like, and just poke the holes and cut them and put them on your face. And when you're done, you look all, Mavs colors, whatever. You just peel it off and you're done. It was great. We did some tests. We got Dr. Pepper to put their logo there. Awesome. Kids loved it. 10,000 of them went out the door. They were cheap to make. And so the guy, I forget his name. But all of a sudden one day I'm getting a report. So the way I like to do is I like to get weekly, depending on how good the company is, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, or quarterly. The better the company, the longer you can wait. But I always want bad news first. Because I invested in you because I expect good news. But when there's a problem, I want to know about it because I want to be able to help you and get it through it. And so with Game Face, I got my reports, and all of a sudden the money was gone. I'm like, what'd you spend all this money on? It's gone. And he decided we needed, for the surgical tape, mask, he decided we needed patents all around the world to protect it. I'm like, dude, you've barely sold anything. What are you protecting? Which is another rule of thumb, right? Oh, I got to get a patent. You don't need a patent. There's no good reason to patent something that sucks. But if you can't sell it, right, then you know it sucks. If you can sell it, then you can talk about it, right? But, so in this case, it wasn't that it sucked. It was actually a good product, but the guy went through all of the money. I'm like, so what are you going to do now? I don't know. We'll start small. I'm like, look, we got them together, sitting there drinking iced tea. I'm like, I'm going to do you a favor. I own 33% of the company. I'm going to take over and run it. All you have to, you can go get another job. You can hang out with your kids. I'm not going to you don't have to do anything, and please don't do anything. I've got my 33%. I think this can be big enough. Just seeing what I can see was, going to sporting events and the World Cup was coming and things we could do there and selling sponsors. Just chill, right? Here's the beer. I'll send you beer. Whatever you need, just chill. So we shake on it. And so we're grinding it out, right? And sales are going, and I'm like, okay, this is working. 6 months later, I get an email from one of my guys. You're not going to believe what he did. I'm like, what did he do? He created his own newgameface.com or whatever it was to compete with me. I'm like, are you shitting me? It's just like, look, as an entrepreneur, you guys are entrepreneurs. You've got to have a screw loose. You got to be a little freaky somewhere along the line. That's just the nature of the beast because it's so competitive and there's so much at stake. But come on, man. It was just like, so they run the gamut.
Well, but I think some of the lessons you put through this are important with the focus on sales first, because my father would say to me all the time, the harder I work, the luckier you get.
Yep.
And so there's no trade secrets in this. This is just, you have to outwork the competition, whoever anybody else is that stands in your way. And you don't even have to necessarily, I think about entrepreneurs today, and I think about my dad at the time. He knew nothing about media, knew nothing about publishing. The only thing he knew is that he said, I have 3 hungry kids at home I got to feed, so I just have to work harder than everybody else and sell it.
Yep.
And I think the sales part, which I'd like you to say on it for a moment, really is the most important element for an entrepreneur, because if I had $1 for everyone who brought me an idea without a plan behind it, we have a private equity firm that we fund that we were running, and that we would invest in folks, and they would spend all the time telling you about this plan, but never give you the thing about how you had to sell. And that's like, well, if you're the CEO, you're in charge. You have to be the number one salesperson.
Always. No
right?
exceptions.
You've got to be the number one salesperson.
I always say to people, if you come up with an idea where you say, I can make dollar bills for 50 cents, would you go out and raise money, or would you just go out and sell it? You just go out and do it, and that's what you have to do. And look, we all go through that fear factor of, do I quit my job? Can I do this? Can I do this, and what happens next? The one thing I know with 100% certainty, and what I would tell myself is, if I can sell and become a better and better salesperson and be great at selling, I'm always going to be successful whether I'm working for myself or if the company that I started just didn't work. I'll give you an example. Out of Indiana, before I went down to Dallas, I needed to start something. And I decided that everybody drank milk, and I found this product, powdered milk, that was cheaper, and everybody needed to save money. And I was going to go out there and sell it because it was cheaper. Now, it didn't taste quite as good. And so but I went out there to try to sell it. Failed miserably. But I learned how to make the sales effort even when things weren't going right. I learned that the rejection was, every no got me closer to a yes. That not every product was perfect, but I could take those same skills, even in failure, and translate them. So that what I learned selling garbage bags door to door, what I learned from selling powdered milk that was awful, what I learned from selling local area networks at Micro Solutions, all those things accumulated, and I got better at selling. So I always knew, people always say to me, if you lost everything, what would you do? I can sell. I can sell. And it's not about selling ice to Eskimos. It's not about, convincing people to do this. Selling is always about helping. Selling is always about understanding the person you're talking to and what their needs are. And if someone can help me make my life easier, yeah. People, now with employees, people always say, well, what's the definition of a great employee? Someone who can reduce the stress of those around them. And it's the same thing. What's the definition of a great salesperson? Someone who can reduce the stress of their salespeople. And if in looking at your company, and looking at your life and looking at your goals, if you're able to go out there and recognize that whether it works or doesn't work, you're putting yourself in a position where you're helping somebody, not convincing somebody, and you're reducing their stress. You're gonna be okay. It's gonna work out, and that's the confidence I've built in myself that wasn't necessarily always there. But I learned that if I try to help, if I reduce people's stress, good things can happen.
You have always been viewed as brutally honest, brutally frank.
Yeah,
Sometimes to your detriment. I don't really think it's your detriment. I think it's just you being brutally honest.
Yep.
And going back to the NBA, when with the referee, with the referees, and I forgot the guy's name. I think it was Ed Rush.
Ed Rush Jr. Yeah.
And you said he might be the worst.
No, I said he couldn't hire. I wouldn't hire him to manage a Dairy Queen.
That's right. You wouldn't hire him to manage a Dairy Queen. So Dairy Queen called you and said you couldn't run the store, so you went over to Dairy, and they hired you for the day to run a Dairy Queen. And
I know to this day, if you want to make a Dairy Queen swirl, you do 9-1-7 with the count 9-1-7.
So you did it.
Learned something new, huh? Now it was worth all the money.
But the league has changed.
Yep.
The world has changed, but the league has changed. Because now there was a time you were drafting and bringing in seasoned players. Mm-hmm. Now you're taking a chance, basically somewhat rolling the dice on some kid, generally 19 years old or 20 years old.
Yep.
But there are always one or two who are kind of like the best, right? When I say the best, they are obvious candidates.
Yep.
And there's been a lot of discussion. They're trying to adjust and change it towards making sure the teams don't tank.
Right.
Right.
So you
famously said back in February 2018, well, shoot. If I want to get the best opportunity.
Okay.
Then,
there's a backstory there.
But explain. So, since you were fined $600,000 for it anyway, that gives you the opportunity.
And I had to talk him down for more. Right. So.
Explain what you were saying
okay.
and what is really going on.
So there's two things going on here. One, our season wasn't going as planned, and I had to be honest with our players, because the difference between winning 5 more, 10 more, 15 more games and not winning those games is the difference between getting what we have now, the 5th pick, or the 9th or 10th or 11th pick, which the higher in the draft, or the lower the pick, right? The higher the number, the less likely you are to draft an all-star. Now, there's no guarantees if you have a 5th pick or even 1st pick, you're going to get an all-star quality player, but your odds are improved. And so our goal at the Dallas Mavericks is to win championships. And I sat down with a bunch of our players and went to dinner with them and said, look, this is the reality. Our best option is to lose. Hold that right there. Now, they understood, right? They're not stupid. They want to win championships. It's not win 35 games, win 40 games. Okay, now what do we accomplish? But if we can put ourselves on a path towards a championship, they understand, and that's what they want to be part of. And they recognize there's pain to get that game. So hold that. All-Star, February of 2018, I get a request to be interviewed by Julius Erving. Now, growing up in Pittsburgh, there wasn't an NBA team. The closest team was Philly. Julius Erving was my idol, my basketball idol as a kid. Literally, if y'all remember this old movie, The Fish That Saved Pittsburgh, they filmed that in Pittsburgh when I was a kid, and I took a bus and went however many changes with my bus. I took a bus everywhere back then, but and I went to watch it just to see Dr. J. When I got to go to my first NBA All-Star game after I bought the team, it was in Philly, and I have a picture of Dr. J standing about where the lectern is over there, and me right here, and I get someone to take it just so I can be in the same picture of Dr. J. And so I'm sitting there with Dr. J doing his podcast, and I'm just like a fangirl, right? You know. And so we're talking about being in, he's asking me questions like you are, and he's talking about being, a player's owner. And not even thinking, I'm like, yeah, I had, a conversation where I told our players our best option is to lose. Bam. That's what it took. And that got out. And then it became, Mark Cuban says, the Mavs are tanking, which was true. And if I hadn't, said it that way, it would have been okay, because there's 8 other teams that were tanking too. But yeah, so I got hit for a lot of money. Is what it is.
What do you think the solution is? What do you, if you were suddenly put in the commissioner's seat, what do you think the solution is to make
what I would say?
Yeah.
I don't think we have to change it all that much. What I would tell you is the team with the worst record can't get better than the 4th pick, and the team with the 2nd worst record can't get better than the 5th pick. And then you have the lottery for the rest. And so all of a sudden, come the end of the season, if it's looking like you're going to have the worst record, you have no chance to get the 1st pick. 2nd worst record, you have no chance to get the 2nd best pick. You're going to play. And you're going to play hard, and you're going to make trades because you have to win. Otherwise, you lose the opportunity. And then you let all the other teams do the lottery the way they do it now. So that's what I would have suggested, but they don't always listen to me.
Maybe they should.
I tell them that all the time.
Let's switch the conversation to politics for a moment.
Oy.
You have been rumored
Uh-huh.
to, in many ways, I think would be positive. I'm sure this audience would agree with this, but it's demonstrated now that you can be just about anything and become
President
President of the United States.
For better or worse.
For better or for worse. And you've been very vocal critic of President Trump. So tell us what your thoughts are, not so much about beating up on the president, but
Right.
what you see is happening in this country that is dividing this country, in my view. The divisive politics, the
Right.
divisive conversations about everything, what's happening with, and this is happening with both Democrats and Republicans.
Sure.
It's happened with, and it is starting to bring out other things with men and women and all the above. So tell me your thoughts in regards to what you're seeing in this political landscape and whether or not you would actually really consider.
But let me do that
doing
part. Would I consider it? Yes. Do I know I'm going to do it? I mean, I'm not close to saying yes, but it's something I'll consider because, that I have 3 kids, 8, 11, and 14. The older 2 are girls and a boy. And, the definition of being an awful parent is running for president when you have kids that age. And it's such a great age, I just don't want to put them through it unless I have to. And so we're not to that point yet. But in terms of what's going on in the country, I think America works best when we're Americans first. That we all are going to be who we are, our race, our ethnicity, where we came from. And we're always going to be proud of that, and we're always going to recognize that. But when that's our only identity and it becomes kind of our team, almost like our sports team, and then that tribalism starts to pull us apart. But when we think about who we are, we're 99% the same. Whether you come from the United States, you're an immigrant, your parents were immigrants, however you got here, we're 99% the same. And I think it takes leadership to get us to recognize that. We want all our fellow Americans to succeed. We want all our fellow Americans to get along. We don't want to wake up in the morning, every morning, feeling stress about what's going on in the world, And so I think rather than, if I were to run, the impetus would be, you can't be a Republican. You can't be a Democrat. Because that tribalism is as bad as any other tribalism. That's separating us as much as anything. But you can be an American. You can be independent of those and just try to do the right things. And, and I think that starts with leadership, and that leadership starts with everybody deserves respect. Everybody. No exceptions. Everybody deserves opportunity. No exceptions, right? Everybody needs to be treated as an American, that is an American citizen or legally here, needs to be treated as such. And for those who, have issues, aren't here, we need to care and figure it out you don't throw people under the bus because they don't fit who you think they should be. And so I think we get so caught up in the news, and we get so caught up in, what our president does or doesn't do, and that just gets us all torqued up. When in reality, somebody, whether it's me or somebody else, it doesn't matter. Somebody needs to say, we're all Americans first. We all deserve opportunity. We all deserve respect, with respect probably being first and foremost. And if Americans care for each other, we can do things together. That's what makes America special. Look, we're all entrepreneurs here. You're all here because you want to create. You're all here because you believe the American dream is still alive and well. You're all here because you want a better life for your family. And when we do these things together, and when we come together, those things can happen. Now, there's no perfect candidates. There's no perfect solutions. God, I'm sounding like a politician, aren't I?
Yes.
But this is just what I feel, and it's just, we just need somebody that says, put aside the Democrats, put aside the Republicans. You guys had your shot. Now it's time for a new America. Let's all come together. And look, even the furthest left and the furthest right, there's so many commonalities that we can gather around and respect that makes this country great. And I just think that can pull us together, as opposed to, no, it's worse than sports. It's like, oh, how many rings do you have? Or your team sucks, or your team sucks. That's what we're turning into. It's like we're all bandwagoners in some political or some tribe. And I just think that's wrong. And if we can get past that, with whether it's me or whoever it is, there's still greatness in this country. We don't need to make it great again. It is great.
Well, I'd love to see you lead the Common Sense Party.
But you know what? And that's interesting, though, right? Because it brings the question, do you create another party? And the reality is you can't. You can't create another party. You have to get individuals, communities, groups standing up and saying, we're doing this because it's the right thing to do. It's not come join my party and get away, because then you're just another party, right? Do it as individuals. Individuals need to stand up. Families need to stand up. Communities need to stand up and do what they think is right. And one of the things I am doing, and putting my money where my mouth is, one of the challenges that we have with politics is we don't always get the best candidates. And there's all kinds of rules that are established that say, if you want to run for federal office and get on the ballot in the state of Texas, you have to go out there and literally get, I think the number is, and I'm not positive, but numbers like 57,000 signatures. What are you going to do, walk through Texas to get 57,000? Yes, people hire people to do that and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars just to get on the ballot, which means 99% of the best candidates can't get on the ballot. So we're working on getting some independent candidates and putting together some programs so that we can fight some of these laws and get them changed. It's not going to happen fast. It'll be a multi-year thing, but hopefully we'll be able to change the ballot access laws so the best candidates can get on, and it's not about parties. Because the Republicans and the Democrats, it's to their benefit to make it bipartisan, just to keep their candidates ahead of the game. And so, hopefully we'll be able to figure this out, and, I'm happy to fund
It strikes me strange, though, that all of these disruptions happening in politics, but yet the conversation continues oftentimes to be, if you watch CNBC, CNN, and Fox, and you put them all on at the same time to watch these different channels talking about the same exact issue, but completely different points of view. And then it always errs in, well, look how well the stock market's doing. Look how much more money you have, despite the fact that it only impacts a very small percentage of people, right? In other words, so it's the conversation, the country's doing great again.
But
there's more wealth than there ever has been.
Which is true, right? Look, it's easy to rip on Trump, and there's things on a general basis, on a macro basis, the country's doing better financially. But he's worried about the Chinese trade deficit and the Canadian trade deficit. I'm worried about the wallet deficit. you know, because even though, unemployment's lower, not in every community. There are places, I'm sure in Charlotte, in Texas, in California, has 10% plus unemployment. But your cost of health, look, us as entrepreneurs, we know when it comes to hiring somebody, it's not just about what wage we pay them, insurance or healthcare, or competing with somebody else that offers it. There's the cost of rent, too damn high and going higher, right? There's other expenses, cost of interest rates are now going up, and cost of, there's just our cost of tuition. It's interesting to me that we have $1.3 trillion in tuition that's owned by Americans. That's a $1.3 trillion, but the whole trade deficit with China is $375 billion. What should we worry about first? Now, I'm all for fair trade. Go negotiate, right? But let's not forget about the wallet deficit, right? The things that are costing all of us money. Look, I remember the day I paid off my student loan. And I remember the day I got to throw away all the demand notices. And I remember the day, back in the day, when I got to turn my answering machine back on because I was tired of getting those stupid messages. Excuse me, Mr. Cuban, this is so-and-so from the Pennsylvania State. Yeah, you get the drill. And so there are a lot of things that we can focus on that focus on the needs of all Americans again. And again, it's not that what he's paying attention to is wrong. There's value there in negotiating those things and making them better, and you can make them better for the United States, but it's a question of priorities. And I think that's where he's gotten a little askew.
I'm about to open it up to the audience of questions. I wanted to give you credit, too, to something that you have done with the Mavericks, which I think is extraordinary. A lot of organizations mean to do well, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes they hit a blind spot, right?
Yep.
It's happened to you all with the Mavericks. It's happened to a number of organizations. I don't think people wake up in the morning and say, how can I find ways to exclude people?
Right.
Right? Or I want to, or not advance women or do other things. We have a huge event that we put on every year called the Women of Power Summit, which continues to be one of our most highly sought after events. But what you did with the Mavericks most recently, when you had this
let's tell people what happened. Look, I had a CEO who I trusted to run the organization, and he ran the organization for 15 years and has been gone for 3, and somebody accused him of sexual harassment. We had another individual that was involved with the sexual assault of an employee outside of work that didn't happen at work. And we had another employee that just was a mess. And we didn't handle it as an organization as well as we should. And, a lot of the stuff, or almost all of it, I didn't know was going on. Not that that's an excuse, but I reckon, once it was brought to my attention, it was like, it was unacceptable that I had let my company, as an entrepreneur, as an owner, get to this point. And I knew I had to fix it, and I knew I had to bring in a pro. And I was really blessed when I got connected to Cint Marshall. And so I know a lot of you know her, and it's easy just to say that Cint is a force of nature.
Well, I'm not sure.
But I'm not done. Let me finish.
Okay, yeah,
Let me finish one thing. It's easy to say she's a force of nature because she is. But what I know now that I didn't know when I hired her is that she's a phenomenal manager. And we talked about all these things that I look at Shark Tank for companies and what's important to me, and then the same things that are important when I invest or when I start a company. And without me prodding her or suggesting things, bam, 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 I just watch her do all the right things. And not talking about posing or making it perception-wise, sitting down with employees, dealing with issues, taking responsibility, putting people on a path towards, success, helping understanding, the goals of our employees, and helping them reach their goals and helping them understand what it takes to get there. And if they can't, being brutally honest and saying it's time to move on. So, Cint, wherever you are, you're amazing. Thank you.
Well,
you saved my life.
What I was going to say is, for many of the people who don't know that, but the CEO of the Dallas Mavericks happens to be an African-American woman, and her name is Cynthia Marshall, and she's here. So I'd like Cynthia to stand up
Cint.
and be recognized. And it says a lot about you because if I look around the other 31 teams, or 29 teams, excuse me, they don't have an office that looks like your office.
I mean, honestly, I didn't care if Cint was purple.
Right.
She's just really, 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 really good. And to me, that's what's important. And what she's teaching me and what I'm learning, that, diversity is not just a word, and it's not just a body count. It's not just a checklist. It's not even about inclusion. It's about recognizing the skill set that somebody different than you brings to the table and putting that to use. And honestly, I didn't know that before. Before all this happened, I didn't know that. I thought if I treated you like I expected to be treated, then I was treating you equally, and that was good enough. But treating people equally is not the same, is not recognizing who they truly are and taking advantage of their skills. And I've learned that through Cint. I've learned that through all this. And, like Cint and I talk, we'll be a much better organization. I'll be a better exec. I'll be a better investor. I'll be a better shark because I recognize that, treating people equally is not the same as treating them, recognizing their skills and their differences. And for this audience, it's critically important. And I think there's an opportunity now, and I know hopefully, people like me will recognize that the old white guys, now newly old white guys that are in positions of power, that there are things that you can do that I can't do. That there are things you see that I don't see. There are opportunities that you can create that I can't create. We were trying to sell to the black community through the Mavs with multiple white men. We were trying to sell to moms with multiple white men. It's not that they're not capable. It's not that they're not skilled. It's just everybody brings something different to the table. And as an entrepreneur, you have to recognize what the differences are that you bring to the table, and you have to be brutally honest with yourself, right? You can't lie to yourself like we all lie to ourselves as entrepreneurs. But those differences can be part of your unique skill set, like I talked about earlier. And now I'm finally starting to recognize those things. And the one thing I know, it's going to make me a shitload more money.
Okay, so we're going to open this up to some questions and answers. But let me be clear. I'm not looking for quanswers.
I'm stealing that one.
Right.
Oh,
I'm looking for a question. And if you start down the path of giving us a sales pitch, I'm going to cut you off.
Okay.
So this is not the time. This is not a shark. This is not the elevator pitch competition.
Oh, that's great.
I want questions, not quanswers.
Answers. I'm stealing that one.
Good
You're
evening.
going to hear that at Shark Tank.
Good evening, Mr. Mark Cuban. I drove 6 hours just to ask this question to you. My name is Stephen Price.
Hey, Stephen.
You talked about companies having a unique advantage. Can you speak more on that for me, please?
Sure. I mean, what is it that a customer can get from you that they can't get from anybody else? And you have to be very careful with that, too. When I just talked about lying to yourself as an entrepreneur, because often we'll say, well, it's just like Uber, but it has pink cars. Uber doesn't have pink cars. That's a difference without a distinction, right? Lots of times people get confused between what's a product and what's a feature. Pink Uber cars, that's a feature. That's not a unique product. Excuse me. So you have to know what it is that you do that is so unique, your potential customers say, whoa, I did not know that. As opposed to, well, let me go tell Uber that they should probably add pink cars. Because whenever you're competing with, all of you are going to compete with Amazon at some point, if you're not already. Just the reality. And so you've got to understand, when Amazon starts looking at my customer base, what is it that I can convey to them that makes me unique. And that's what I meant by unique difference.
Hello, how are you?
Hi. Good.
I'm Saray Jackson.
No,
and I'm
speak up, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry, is that better?
Yeah.
My bad. So I'm Saray Jackson, and I just recently saw a episode of Shark Tank where a lady was on there with bread pudding. I make a graham cracker treat, and everything I make is on a graham cracker. So, but eventually I want to be kind of like the next Auntie Anne's or something like that in the malls across America. So you guys didn't make a deal with her, and it was almost as if she couldn't kind of scale her business to be that big. So I was wondering if that's how you felt, or like, because it's kind of niche a little bit.
Okay, it's niche.
So that's the answer.
Next question, please. It was a niche.
Good evening. My name is Joyce Cooper, and what I would like to know is, as we build our businesses, should we think about building them to sell, or in my case, I would like to leave a legacy for my family for generations to come. So what advice do you give?
What was the second part of it? I didn't understand.
Should we, when we build our businesses, should we look to build our businesses knowing that one day we may have to sell? Or in my case, I really would like to leave a legacy for generations to come. So what advice would you give someone like me?
So don't think about the exit, right? Just think about surviving and then keeping your customers happy and growing. If you're worried, if you're already spending the money you haven't made yet or have a vision for it, those are brain cycles that you're taking away from getting those first customers and making them happy. It's great to dream. I'm not saying I used to drive by the big houses with the hole in my floorboard and hope someday I can do that and use that as motivation. So it's great to dream, but you got to stay focused as much as possible. Thank you. Good luck.
Hey, how you doing? My name is
great,
Trey
man.
Jackson. I'm in the video production field. As you created your broadcast TV company in the time that it was the whole industry was emerging, so you did really well. I found that my industry, it's camera phones are taking over, and videographers are less valued. Like, looking for what kind of industry or what can make me unique in that field, and how to leverage, like, in this space of media is so everywhere, but
So I get that question all the time. So
Okay.
what industry should I look at? I can tell you all about artificial intelligence, computer vision, personalized medicine, but then what, right? And so, and maybe you're an expert in one of those fields and you can go for it. But what I tend to try to tell people in terms of what does it take to be successful, find something you love to do and then be great at it. Not average, not marginal, not good enough, but if you can be great at it, be great at it. If you are the greatest videographer in the history of videographers, people don't care about cell phones. What is it that you can do that makes them know that the way you do it is special? And if you can do that and convey it, then you'll be fine. If you're not sure, then you've got to decide whether you want to stay on your own, be a contractor, or go work for somebody. It just depends. And let me add one other thing. I crushed myself, and like my brothers didn't. They took a completely different path, and they were looking just 9 to 5 at yada yada. Not everybody's got to be an entrepreneur. And so if you've got it in your blood and that's what you want to do, then find a way to be great. And if not, you'll figure it out. You'll find something else.
Hello,
Hi.
my name is Jillian Highshaw. I'm an attorney. And how do you scale a nonprofit to be a for-profit when you're working in rural communities in high poverty areas?
How do you scale a nonprofit to be a profit?
For-profit. To be a for-profit when you're working in high poverty rural
Well,
communities.
it depends what the business is. What type of law work do you do?
Agricultural law and estate planning.
I have no clue. Sorry.
I'm going to take a moment to ask a last question.
Sure.
And we have a lot of entrepreneurs here and a lot of African American entrepreneurs, many of whom, when they talk to me, always say, all I need is X thousands of dollars or X million. There's always a number,
Always.
right? It's always, if I only had
If only,
X,
yeah,
right?
if only.
And it's this, the biggest impediment in their mind seems to be, quote, access to capital. And I keep saying this, that the biggest impediment for African American businesses, minority-owned businesses in this country, is not access to capital. It is scale. Because if you don't have scale, I can't sell, even if I make a great widget, right? I make a great bottle of water, but I only can make 100 of them. I can't do business with Walmart. I can't do business with Nationwide. I can't do business with AT&T. So the biggest obstacle for us is scale. Biggest obstacle for any small business, forget about whether African American, is not access to capital, because there's plenty of capital. In fact, there's too much capital right now, right? There's a lot of dumb capital that's chasing business, chasing deals. What would your advice be to those who recognize that, yeah, they need money, but it's really about making a better, because scale comes through sales.
Right.
Scale comes through making a better product than everyone else.
That's what I tell them, right? So there's a Shark Tank company from last season called Mush, right? Cool stuff. It's like this oatmeal that they packaged. It's fresh dried oatmeal that they packaged with a little spoon, and it has to be refrigerated, but you just grab it and go. And the response was great from the show, and now, like, I just saw their numbers. They went from 50,000 in sales to 100,000 to 125,000 in 3 straight months. It's not scale, but they're growing, right? And they all of a sudden are like, okay, we got to go raise money, and we got to do yada, 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 right? Scale is hard not just because of the economic cost, but also because of the people cost and the mind share cost. It's hard when you're dealing with a major company, and in particular if you're dealing with a big company like a Walmart or Costco or whatever, because you only get one shot at those guys. And so, like I told Mush with Whole Foods, they're interested. I'm like, you're not ready. You're not ready. You have got to crawl before you ball, you know, and so I told him, it's going to be painful not to go after that big customer, but think about what happens if you go after it and A, it's going to take capital you don't have and you're going to borrow it, or B, it doesn't work out and they return it all. Then all of a sudden you're out of business. And so you're right that you need capital to scale, but you also need the confidence that you can scale and that you can keep your customers happy. And so I always tell people, get to the point where you've taken care of the customers that you can take care of. Once you can demonstrate that, then you can get smart money, and you're talking from a position of power. And then you can go to the Walmarts of the world and the Costcos, and you may not even have to raise money. They may even provide PO leverage or PO support or connect you with a bank that does. And so I guess what I'm saying is, don't get too far ahead of yourself, because sometimes sales can be a lot more expensive than you think they are. And you've got to be careful. I've seen several of my Shark Tank companies try to get too big too fast, and it almost put them out of business. And so it's not an easy equation to solve, but it's something that, you know, you've got to be careful and confident about. That answers your question.
Mark, I want to thank you for coming and visiting with us.
This is awesome. Thank you.
Sharing your wisdom, for sharing your thoughts, and for being genuine with our audience, and coming as an entrepreneur, and looking at everybody as the same, and that everyone has value and can bring things. And so, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Mr. Mark Cuban.
Thank you, everybody. That was really good. I really appreciate it. That was fun.
Thank you,
Well done. You've done this before.
Once.
Thank you, everybody.